finally, it is time to take a look at the Karura. Design-wise, this is probably my favorite Lancer. I really like how the Karura looks. Honestly, it looks amazing. It looks kinda scary when you think about the capabilities of this thing. And I believe the first Lancer that was destroyed was a Karura, but overall, to attempt to find out how this thing will work. Now, let me quickly show you the stats of this thing. The roll bonus is about the same as the roll stats of the previous Lancers, of course different from the Hubris because it doesn't have any fighters, but the Karura does have blaster and missile damage bonus as well as a shield volume and shield resistance bonus. So you can use this ship with blasters or missiles depending on what weapon system you have leveled up, and of course primary tank on this thing will be shield, although you do have a armor plate bonus, and I guess in a armor fleet it might work, but this is primarily a shield tank ship and should not be used as a armor tank unless again you are part of a armor fleet. Now I have the barreled missiles, and honestly the barreled missile launcher, or the high angle weapons in this case, are very good for PvP, very good for sub-capitals. If you are after capital ships, then the capital missile launchers would be ideal. I will be using the special module today, and I will also be using, as usual, the grapplers. But the special module basically does enhance your DPS at the cost of reduced repair, and for missiles it also does enhance your damage application, which means that this module will be very important and very useful for not only this Dreadnought but for any other Dreadnought in the game at the moment. And this is basically how the build would look. This is more of a passive shield tank for a shield tank fleet. This thing has some very good passive recharge and has a lot of shield, so you can easily make a passive chunk out of this Dreadnought. And here you can take a look at the rigs that I usually do on most of the Dreadnoughts. So when it comes to the implants, you have 4 different options depending on what weapon you are using. If you're using missiles, then you can use the tactical missiles and the warhead charge. If you're using blasters, you can use the thermocirculation implant or the high power call. So you do have a vast variety of implants to choose from when it comes to the Karura. For the nanocore, you do have the Dragon Trent nanocore, same as with the other capitals, same as with the other Lancers. Not really required to have the nanocore, but if you really like the ship, then I guess you can go and buy the nanocore. But let's take a look at the active stats of this thing. Now the siege modes does give you bonus on the DoomsDay, which we will see later on. 7.2 thousand DPS, 19 million hit points, 91, 93, 94, 95 and 95% resistance on the shield. Not bad, not the most ideal passive rig layout setup that I have right now, but you know, should be enough. And with the new module, 8.3 thousand DPS, with this module you can go with a passive tank, since it will not have any drawback, won't have any side effect from using the module. So it's nice for a passive tank, since it does not hurt the overall tank performance of the ship. So let me dock and let me change
Docking request
build
accepted.
one more time. I'm using the Energizer damage control. You have a bonus on that. You can use the Energizer or you can use the classic damage control. That's totally up to the player or totally up to the situation that you're in. Now, you can go with a full-on build with shield extenders. You can even go with shield generators. When capital shield generators are available, I definitely recommend that you use those because they will give you a lot more shield volume, and they also affect the total passive shield recharge We can technically do a passive shield recharge build on this thing with a dedicated specific integration rig setup, since you do have a lot of shield and the shield regeneration on these things should be pretty good. So you can do something like this with 4 plates, 3 adaptives and a damage control. You can still use the same implant that you already had. You can also add a shield extender general unit, which will enhance the shield volume per extender, and that will overall increase the total amount of hit points to 2.1 million shield hit points at the moment. So let's undock and let me show you how overall the stats look when you have 4 plates. This could potentially be some players' favorite build because of how much resistance it has, and one of the next videos will be me testing this out against super capitals. 21 million hit points, 89, 92, 94, 95% resistance. Not bad. It still has a lot of resistance, even though it only uses 3 adaptives. That's because of the integration rig setup that I have installed on this ship. So that was the build with the missiles. You can replicate the same build with the capital torpedoes, even the normal capital missiles. You can use both depending on what you are doing. Now, time to go and switch to blasters, I believe. Just trying to figure out where are my other capital missiles. They're missing for some reason. Anyway, this would be a active shield tank build. It will retain the same amount of shield resistance, since it has like 3 adaptives and a damage control. 2 batteries and 2 boosters should be more than enough. However, the shield tank on the ship is usually a little bit weaker compared to the shield tank on the Valve arm, for example, since it doesn't get any bonus on the shield boost amount, but still it does boost a fair amount of shield. And when you turn on the special module, it basically halves the repair, so you have to be careful with that. This module definitely works a lot better with a passive shield build, since it will not have any impact on the passive tank, but it does have an impact on the active tank, which is interesting when you think about it. It does remind me on the EVE Online Classic Siege mode in the high slot. Anyway, you can do a 3 battery builds, something that's usually seen a lot more common. And I almost forgot, here you can take a look at the kinetic DoomsDay. Does seem interesting, and we will see this DoomsDay in combat later. But it does have the same drawback. Basically, when you use it, you can't move it while the DoomsDay is charging up, and shooting the ship loses control over the weapons and other modules, so you cannot use anything while the DoomsDay is being used. Now, there is this troll build that I covered a long time ago, and we're about to see if it will work on the Karura. Now, this build works with the level 45 pulse crystal implant. The goal is to have infinite capacitor while having a lot of tank, and this works the best with ships that don't have a lot of shield volume, since 10% on 2.5 million shield hit point will be a lot more than 10% on 750,000 shield. So the goal is to be able to out repair the damage that you're taking from the implant and the damage from the enemy ships. And this did work well on the Valvern, worked really well on the Bane, works really well on the Revelation, works well on the Naglfar, but I don't really think that it would work that well on this ship, since again it has a lot of shield, and 10% on 2 million is going to be a lot more than 10% on 650,000 shield. So you can still pull it off. The two repairs, two boosters are not going to be enough though, that's for sure. I would say at least 3 C-type boosters should be required in order to be able to fully maintain the shield. But I would say 4 would be required if you want to tank a lot more, and maybe you will be able to pull this off, but you'd have to sacrifice a little bit of resistance for capacitor batteries. You can make it work with a lot of boosters, but the goal is to be capacitor stable, and with 4 capital boosters, that's even for the level 45 implant, that's a bit difficult. So let me try something out here. Unfortunately, you will not be able to get a good tank as with the previous Lancers, well, previous 2 Lancers, with the exclusion of the Hubris, because the Hubris is obviously an armor tank, and on the Hubris this would not work well. But excluding the Hubris, this will work well on the Valvarn and on the Bane. Now let me just quickly try out a 2 battery build. I'll sacrifice 1 booster and 1 adaptive. Although you can sacrifice 2 adaptives for 2 batteries, and you can basically use the batteries when you are using all the boosters. It should be enough to maintain the capacitor at a high level. Okay, let me add that, and let's undock and see how this would work with 2 batteries now. 3 C-type boosters should recover about 200,000 shield every cycle. 10% of 2 million should be 20,000 something, at least on the... Actually, 1.2 million, okay, it's not that bad now. I thought it was 2 million in shield. Okay. So, 3 boosters, and yeah, definitely does not look that good. I mean, it still does recover the shield, but yeah, it definitely requires 4 boosters, at least 4 boosters minimum. Yeah, definitely would need a 4th booster if you want this to work. But yeah, on this ship this unfortunately is not going to work well because of how much raw shield hit points it has. So you're better off with a passive or a classic active tank with batteries. But nonetheless was still a interesting little test. So, let me return 1 capital booster and let me see how it would work with a 4 booster. Let's also take a look at the distances. I'm very curious to see if this is actually going to make a difference. It will probably. I'm not using all C-types because I don't have C-types in this station here. But still, nonetheless, going to be a very good test to see what's happening with the tank and with the build here. Well, still has some decent resistance, can't complain about that. Still looked good. The shield is now fully recovered, and I can use the batteries. Now the batteries will be depleted. The capacitor of the capacitor battery is going to take 1 or 2 sips, and then when it does sip the capacitor, it's going to be pretty much empty in a cycle. But does seem to be somewhat working now with a 4th booster. So yeah, 4 boosters are definitely required, and at least 1 capacitor battery to kind of help the implant out with the capacitor usage. But nonetheless, not bad. Not bad at all. However, not as good as with the previous Dreadnoughts that I tried out. The Revelation, Bane, and the Valvarn did this a lot better. So let's do a DPS build. Let's see how this thing will work. And look, when it has a DPS rigs. Now I'll be using the capital loading accelerators, which basically does enhance the rate of fire. If you are using blasters, then you change the rigs into blasters. I will show that as well. 14,000 DPS. This is how it would look like. I did add 1 micro warbrick because usually some of them do have this. Some players do have this build. And here you can take a look at the low slot modules, adaptive hardener, extender, and a energizer damage control. But you can also use a classic damage control. Will work the same way. Should still have some very interesting tank as well, but we're about to test that out when I undock. So let's see what the maximum DPS on this thing is going to be. Now you can also use missile guidance computers to enhance the damage application, and I'll show that later on in this video. The missile high angle weapons, or the barreled missile launchers, are, I would say, the scariest high angle weapons, since they can still have like 100,000 alpha damage on sub-capitals, and they're very, very good for PvP. They're very good for PvE as well. You can break camps, sub-capital camps with this thing, and if you have a proper high angle build, this thing can kind of be unstoppable. So overall, the high angle missiles, or in this case the high angle torpedoes on this thing, are probably my favorite high angle weapon system on any Dreadnought. I would use the same on a Bane Lancer as well, because it's just that good and that it works really well. You use zero capacitor as well, which is also kind of interesting when you think about it. 15,000 hit points with the implant. Let's unlock and let's see how much DPS I can get with the warhead charge. Now the warhead charge is probably the player's favorite, but you also have tactical missiles, which does give you more paper DPS, but the warhead charge implant does give you more sustained, stable DPS, as well as a lot more damage application. I have some good range as well. 102 kilometer range with the high angle missiles, with the high angle weapons on the Karura. 21,000 DPS, 25,000 DPS, 28,000 DPS, and with the last one, 30.4 thousand DPS. Then you do have different modes that you can use: long range mode, precision mode. So I'll show the stats of that later, but first let's take a look at the maximum DPS. 38,000 DPS on the barreled torpedo launchers, on the missiles. Well, this is definitely to wreck sub-capitals, because they're designed to be used against sub-capitals. The less DPS when you go into the long range mode, but 133 kilometer range, which is pretty solid. And you also have the precision mode, which will also reduce your DPS, but you do have much better damage application. So yeah, this does look scary, and this does have a
Docking
very
request
interesting
accepted.
DPS output. Now, as I mentioned before, you can easily use the missile guidance computers. That's actually something I recommend that you do have on this ship. They will enhance the range, speed, and the application of the missiles. In most cases, I actually prefer missile application over paper DPS, since you will end up doing a lot more damage this way. Usually applies to smaller targets, like in this case smaller target would be a battleship, cruiser, battlecruiser, frigate. And the high angle weapons, in this case the barreled missiles, are kind of the ideal anti-subcapital weapon system on a Dreadnought. 164 km is the maximum range in the long range mode, and when we go into the precision mode, 138 meter is the explosion radius. Now when I turn on the modules, it is 79.95 meters, so okay, that's actually pretty good, and over 200 kilometer missile range, which is indeed impressive. How much range do I get? 164 kilometer, and when I turn on the modules, the maximum flight range is about 223 kilometers. That's actually really good. That's actually really solid.
Docking request accepted.
If you go in the precision in the long range mode, I think we can hit over 300 kilometers, 350 kilometers, but for some reason it did not show correctly, which is kind of funny, but yeah, you definitely have a lot of range on this thing. And now time for the blaster build. Now when you go with a blaster build, of course I have to change the rig, so we'll have to change the overall build. But you do have two options. You have the thermal circulation implant and the high power coil. Now the thermal circulation will give you more DPS, but it is much less sustained and lasts for a very short amount of time, and it does require you to be very careful not to overheat the implant. While the high power coil does give less DPS, but it is much more sustained. And I will show you the DPS of both implants today. However, I have to say the thermal circulation is definitely my favorite when it comes to blaster implants, because it is multi-purpose. You can use it for tank, and also I can use it for DPS. Now I have 29, almost 30,000 DPS cold with the siege mode active, which is good. And the blasters do have good tracking for capital blasters, and they have decent range as well. So let's enter the implant menu, let's go to the thermal circulation, and let's go and add a bit more range. You can enhance the range easily, since you're obviously not going to be a armor tank. In most cases, of course, you can use an armor tank, but a shield tank on the Karura is preferred. Let's undock and let's see how much DPS I can get out of this thing. I expect about 102,000 DPS or something, which is definitely getting into super capital ship level territory. That's pretty good. So let's quickly charge up the thermal circulation implant. The way how this works your DPS is going to be high between 70 and 99 hit. If you overheat, you significantly lose the DPS, and I have 35,000 DPS now, which is pretty good. That's with the special module active. When you separate the weapons, it does charge a bit faster. Usually that's how you should be using the thermocirculation when it comes to the DPS aspect of it. Charging the implant just a little bit more, and then the DPS part will kick in. And again, expect a lot of DPS out of this ship. It can be very good for hot drops. A DPS Karura fleet can be scary. 70,000 DPS. Okay, let's see. 86,000 with the first one, with the second one. 103,000 DPS. 115,000 DPS. 121,591.07 DPS with the Karura. Yeah, this is definitely in super capital ship level territory. This will be, that's actually a lot of DPS. 10 of these ships and you have 1.2 million
Docking request
DPS
accepted.
on average. It can be a lot more if you have an nanocore, of course, and if you have better modules, better general units and stuff, definitely can be much higher.
Undocking.
Now with the high power coil, the DPS will be less, but it's going to be a lot more sustained. And I would say in longer battles both implants will work well, depending on what you're doing with the ship, of course. I personally prefer high power coil for longer battles since it's more sustained and you can definitely deal a lot more damage in the longer run, in the longer run. And I like high power coil for a single target, for a hot drop or something. You can pre-charge the implant and jump on top of the enemy and then just kill him. 106,450.34 DPS with the high power coil. Not bad. Pretty decent.
Docking request accepted.
Now, can you use this ship for PvE? Yes, you can. For PvE, I prefer barreled weapons since they have a lot more tracking. You can use the barreled blasters, or you can use the missiles, the barreled missiles, depending on what skill you have. However, I don't recommend that you mix weapons. Use one weapon system, don't mix. So yeah, for PvE I would recommend, from my personal experience, I would say missiles might be ideal for this ship, but at the same time you can also go with blasters if you have skills for blasters. The beauty of these ships is the fact that you can use two weapon systems. The Lancers are actually the first true Tech 2, Tier 2 or Tech 2 level ships from EVE Online, since these ships also have dual weapon systems, and some of the other Tech 2 ships in EVE Online do have dual weapon systems on them, and we will see a lot more of that added. I'm very curious to see what the next big update will bring. But this would be a PvE build. However, I'm still not a fan of this build, and I'll probably never be a fan of this build because it has literally no tank. if you get jumped with this build, you die. That's just what happens. You can hold for some time, but one booster and one adaptive and a damage roll is just not going to be enough for a hot dark moment. And for PvE, I usually prefer the classic high angle build with 2 damage mods, 2 batteries, 2 hardeners, and 2 boosters. That's usually that's what usually works the best. Anyway, time to see that DoomsDay in action. We have seen all the DoomsDays so far in action, ranging from the Bane, the Hubris, Valvarn. Every DoomsDay has its own animation, every DoomsDay has its own thing. And the Titan DoomsDay works in a very similar way. Every Titan will have its own DoomsDay animation, and I think the Avatar DoomsDay is definitely the most famous one. The Titans are definitely coming this summer, so that's going to be fun to test out. But yeah, I'm kind of messed up here. I entered Siege. Now the DoomsDay cannot be fired. It has a very specific way of operation. It's quite a tactical module. You must be stationary, and when you start firing the DoomsDay, it has a 3 kilometer wide beam, which is actually not bad. Technically should be able to be very useful for PvE. If you are doing laboratory missions, a well-focused DoomsDay beam will clear a whole wave. That's kind of fun when you actually start using it. The DoomsDay does cost a lot of fuel though, so you will not be able to fire more than 3-4 times if you have maxed out skills. Depending on, of course, the fuel source. My fuel source is not good, but you can definitely fire the DoomsDay a lot if you have plasmoids, but if you're using any other fuel, you might not be able to fire the DoomsDay that often. So, let me stop the ship, since I did not stop the ship the first time. Needs to be below 5 meters per second in order to fire the DoomsDay. Okay, and let's yeet the DoomsDay. Now when you're firing a DoomsDay, you cannot use any other module, so you really have to be careful when you're using it, and you cannot warp or cannot move, you cannot do anything for 3 minutes after using it. And it does have a very nice beam. It's a nice green DoomsDay, I like it. Yeah, it's definitely very satisfying to look at, for sure. And just like that, a whole wave of ships is gone. Kind of funny when you think about it. Unfortunately, it does kill the wrecks, so it kills anything in the beam's path. Wrecks, ships, cloaky ships, anything. So if you like to loot the missions, yeah, you definitely don't want to use the DoomsDay, but that's how the DoomsDay works on the Karura. Honestly, I would say my favorite DoomsDay is probably the Bane DoomsDay, since it looks kind of like, I think, blue, and this might be my second favorite. Does look green, although I have to say it does look something between green and blue. I think aquamarine might be the accurate color. I mean, I'll never get colors right, I know, but it does look very nice. I love it. And the missiles, basically 1 shot, 1 kill, which is very interesting. The missiles definitely have some very nice alpha damage. Now let's launch a second round of DoomsDay at the mission here, at the mission Rats. This time, much better angle. You should focus on the ship that's literally in the middle, so you cover most of them with the beam. But yeah, can you do some DoomsDay PvE? Yes, you can. As funny as that sounds, it works. it works really well. And again, I suggest that you try to focus the ship in the middle, the battleship in the middle, or any ship in the middle, to be honest, so that you can kill most of them in one single hit. You will not be able to kill all of them since the faster ships will move out of the beam, but you will be able to cover most with the beam. And Lancers, gameplay wise, because of the DoomsDay, are one of the more unique ships in the game at the moment. Now, I was trying to mow down all the ships in one single beam, and I think it's about to happen for the last wave. My rate of fire on the missiles seems a bit slow. That's what I noticed. I think that's because I forgot to change the implant. I forgot to change the... not the implant, but I forgot to change the rigs. So I think I still have like blaster rigs. Should have used blasters, would be faster, but I guess this will also do just fine. Tackle frigates can get one hit by the capital high angle missiles, even though they will not apply a lot of damage to them. They will still apply enough damage, since if you have like 100,000 alpha, it doesn't matter how much damage you apply, a frigate will just pop, a frigate will just disappear. So anti-tackle definitely good. The missiles are definitely very good anti-tackle. That's what I wanted to say. But blasters, the barrel blasters, will also get the job done, and in the end really depends what you have skills for. If you have skills for blasters, go with blasters. If you have skills for missiles, go with missiles. You cannot go wrong with the weapon system, and if you already are skilled in a single weapon system, you probably already have enough. You will probably have a implant for that weapon as well, so you will probably be prepared for whatever weapon you choose on this ship. Again, I like missiles. I do like the missiles because of how they work. And for smashing camps, oh yes, this thing can do that quite easily. Although camps that were thrown at me have been super capital camps, and I'm not able to do anything solo with a battleship against those. But the last wave is about to spawn. Now let me show you the fastest wave 5 clear I've ever had. Maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but honestly I find pretty hilarious how quickly the ships disintegrated, and that's why I love the Lancer DoomsDay, because it can just clear everything in just a couple seconds. It's going to be very fun to see how the Titan DoomsDay will work. Those are going to be pretty hilarious to test out. Alright, last wave spawned.
Enemy ships detected.
And let's lock on the ship in the middle. That would be let's go with that battleship. Let's launch the lance and let's see what happens to these ships. They're all clumped together in a ball, basically. Clumped in a ball. 3-kilometer wide DoomsDay. And there we go. Yep. How to kill 30 ships in a single click. And I literally wiped out the whole wave. This is why the DoomsDay on this ship is so fun. I mean, not only on this ship, on any ship really. they have been wiped clean off the map. And well, that would be it for today. That was the Karura Caldaris Lancer Dreadnought. A really awesome ship. Indeed, a very, very awesome ship. If you like this ship, and if you already like the Phoenix, you will definitely love this thing as well. Is it worth to get one of these ships? Definitely. And they have their purpose, they're fun, they have PvE and PvP use, so if you like PvP you can have fun with this thing, if you like PvE you can also have fun with this thing. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe, and with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.